Assalamu alaikum. I will try to be brief. So scholarly treatment of the Ahmadiyya has neither fully uncovered nor appreciated the extent of Ahmadiyya agency and influence on the Islamization process in the United States of America. The Ahmadiyya movement was an organization of Muslims established by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in 19th century British India. The Ahmadiyya should be interpreted as the catalyst for the modern growth of Islam in 20th century America. They engaged American society in four distinct phases. From 1886 to 1902, the letter writing campaign in religious print media. From 1902 to 1920, the period of establishing the English language journals. And from 1920 to 1933, the establishment of direct missionary activity in America. And from 1933 to 1975, which was the emergence of indigenous American Muslim communities. This four-stage periodization of Ahmadiyya engagement of American religious history helps to elucidate the trajectory of 20th century development of Islam. I will briefly discuss the historic context and import of the first two stages, from 1887 to 1920, a 23-year period that establishes the groundbreaking role of the Ahmadiyya in a concerted effort to bring Islam to Americans. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad and his Ahmadiyya supporters were Muslim modernists who declared themselves the only true leaders of the dialogue and efforts to reconcile faith and reason for the world. They saw themselves as completing the work of their middle-aged Muslim predecessors who had provided the bridge for European societies from Dark Age to the era of exploration and enlightenment to the civilizations and scholarship born under the aegis of the Quran. From its inception, the movement's twofold purpose was clearly delineated: to protect and defend Islam internally and externally, and to think out ways and means to propagate Islam in Europe and North America. The late 19th century social-political context from which the Ahmadiyya emerged is critical to understanding its role as one of the most significant movements in the history of 20th century religious development. Between the 17th and 18th centuries, American religious culture was overwhelmingly Protestant. At the close of the 18th century, pioneers of American liberal Christian thought mounted a powerful challenge to the dominant Calvinist theology. In New England, by the 19th century, the evolving Protestant movement had culminated in a standoff between the religious revolt fomented by the Unitarian Manifesto and burgeoning higher criticism movement on the one side, and Calvinist congregational defenders of biblical literacy on the other. As astute observer of world faiths, Ahmed recognized the effort of Christian thinkers to bring clarity to doctrines that contradicted reason. The Ahmadiyya reading of America's spiritual readiness for Islam was based upon this tumultuous struggle waged upon Protestant Christian thinkers during the Victorian faith crisis that manifested most clearly in the establishment of the Unitarian Church. Pointing to this effort to abandon Christian mythology, Ahmed and his supporters began to insist that Christian thinkers, theologians, and other truth seekers apply Quranic lenses to the effort to resolve their faith crisis. The letter writing campaign was an Ahmadiyya literary campaign to promote Islam in Europe and America, and it focused upon publishing articles in American and European religious journals and writing personal letters to spiritually enlightened Americans and Europeans who they deemed sympathetic to Islam's message. In 1886, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad began corresponding with an American theosophist who would eventually become the earliest and most well-known among white American converts to Islam. Ghulam Ahmad's letter writing was central to his strategy for engaging American society. Use the written word to influence the American truth seeker with intellectual argumentation in order to bring him or her in line with the Quran's view on the divine and its relationship to humanity. Alexander Russell Webb interacted with the Ahmadiyya movement by corresponding with both Mirza Ghulam Ahmad and Maulana Muhammad Ali. While Webb is important in his own right as one of the earliest known Americans to convert to Islam, his role in the formation of Ahmadiyya's strategy for cultivating Islam in America deserves more attention. He became the ideal candidate for Ahmadiyya efforts to recruit Americans to Islam. while others have argued that Webb anticipated a strategic Ahmadiyya mission to revitalize Islam as the world religion by missionizing the Western Hemisphere. Webb's correspondence with Mirza Ghulam Ahmad prior to his conversion to Islam suggests that he was following the Mirza's advice to explore Islam as the solution to his spiritual quest and the faith dilemma of Victorian Americans. I won't go more into that history because I'm pressed for time, but I would like to briefly look at the second phase, which began with the review of religion. An effort to bring a more organized and thoughtfully construed presentation of Ahmad's writings culminated in the 1902 establishment of the Review of Religions, an intellectual journal designed for the English-speaking world, and the first continuous English-language Muslim journal of its caliber to circulate in Europe and America. The Review of Religions was followed by a second Ahmadiyya English-language journal, the Islamic Review in India, Muslim India, published in Woking, England, and similarly distributed among readers in Europe and the United States. Both journals combined to serve as the premier sources for Islam in America prior to the 1920 official establishment in the United States of the Ahmadiyya Movement. The Review of Religion articles critiqued Christianity with modern biblical criticism and Quranic arguments. Ahmadiyya intellectuals were uniquely poised to deal with the highest form of enlightened thought in American society, particularly as represented by Christian theologians and biblical scholars on the one hand, and the esoteric non-Christian and alternative Christian thinkers on the other. This included the Theosophists and Baha'i and their respective sympathizers, whose European counterparts composed the vanguard of converts to Islam in Europe. Review of Religion editors argued that Islam was compatible with the modern scientific progress of European and American societies, and Quranic guidance was what had illuminated European modernity. They asserted that the truly enlightened Europeans and Americans would naturally turn to Islam, as it was the source of universal truth and the West's own scientific progress. And what I'd like to point out is that during these two phases, you did not really have any effort of this scope coming from Muslims outside of Muslims in the rest of the Islamic world attempting to develop Islam in the United States. Ghulam Ahmad fashioned his Ahmadiyya movement upon a revised understanding of the traditional concepts of the Islamic Mahdi and the Christian Messiah. He claimed the roles of Islamic Mahdi and Christian Messiah for himself. Steeped in spiritual and religious mysticism, Ahmad's approach set a precedent that permitted a certain degree of intellectual freedom and creativity for his followers that not only countered Christian narratives, but challenged traditionally acceptable Muslim thought and culture as well. Ahmad's bold critique of Sunni Islam ultimately set in motion an operation to cultivate an Islamic population free of the fetters and constraints that plague the Islamic world. It would ultimately provide a blueprint for the strategic ideology and program leading to the indigenous Islamic development in North America. Thank you.